History is repeating itself here, folks, but in a slightly different way. Because this time it's happening the other way around. Because instead of hearing Toto being told to change his fudging car, he is the one to shout first about other people changing their fudging car. And those other teams, I hope they brought printouts. Since we'd already seen the W17 at Silverstone and during the Barcelona shakedown, the launch event itself on Monday was never really going to deliver anything visually new. But what did matter was the messaging from that event. This was Mercedes' first proper chance to talk openly about the season, expand on Toto Wolff's early interpretation of the new regulations, and showcase their Microsoft partnership in full glory, all framed around a glowing belief in the paddock that energy management may be the biggest performance differentiator of the new era. How big? Well, you've got Haas's Ayao Komatsu suggesting that if a driver absolutely nails deployment of the battery alongside the internal combustion engine, that advantage could be as good as half a second to 7/10 of a second. And that is a figure that I would like you to keep in your memory for that little bit longer. Drivers with big brains, they are going to thrive in this new regulation cycle. And in this context, Mercedes look unusually punchy. Sure, they are still retaining some of their stoicism from old, but they are really struggling to do so. You could tell that they are bursting with excitement. They want to tell the world how hyped they are, but they try and keep a lid on it. Because after years of struggle in trying to adjust to the cost cap era after being able to spend whatever they wanted during the big glory days, this is the first year in a very long time where they are going into the season with brimming confidence, save for 2022. Unaware of the horrors of porpoising that would entail that year. And with no Christian Horner to fail at playing nicey-nicey with, according to him, for the time being, the matter of their power unit has once again risen to the surface as a controversial talking point, and Wolff was very keen to clap back at those who were seeking to disallow the engine compression limit innovation that he and Red Bull Ford had reportedly discovered. Now, I'm not saying Toto discovered it himself, his team did. And it makes sense for them to protest this, because this could easily mean more bang for your buck, and in this economy where synthetic fuels are expected to cost hundreds of dollars per gallon, way more than conventional fuel, you will want to get every single ounce of performance out of every single drop. And Toto's chosen to be, let's say, feisty with his response, and I will indulge you with the accent because it's only fair. I'm talking about Toto, I'd be cruel if I didn't. So what's the old dinosaur had to say while he's been shaking his fist to the competition? Most notably, the compatriot team that is Audi. This is for your consideration. Ahem. I just don't understand that some teams concentrate more on the others and keep arguing a case that is very clear and transparent. Communication with the FIA was very positive all along, and it's not only on compression ratio, but on other things too, so just get your... that together. Just doing secret meetings and sending secret letters and keep trying to invent ways of testing that just don't exist. I feel I can just say, at least for us here, we're trying to minimize distractions, looking more at ourselves than at everybody else when it's pretty clear when the regs say, and also pretty clear what the FIA has said to us, and has said to them so far. But maybe we're all different. Maybe you want to find excuses before you've even started for why things are not good. If somebody wants to entertain themselves by distraction, then everybody's free to do this. That is defenseful and prideful there, Mr. Toto. What he's saying right here is that it's really not a big deal and what they're doing is legal, and it's lending me credence as to the whole chicanery regarding engine compression limits. This could easily be a smokescreen for what could be the real differentiator, and they've been talking about this the entire time, but we've been so absorbed by the engine because we understand engines. And Komatsu-san over at Haas, thank you for pointing me in that direction. Wrap everyone around the finger of an engine tweak which at best could give you 0.3 per lap, whilst over on the energy side of things, you could gain maybe double or triple that if you get it right. But there's more. Toto sounds like a man who's been staring at the rulebook as well as emails between the FIA and teams, and a growing pile of friendly concerns from people that now start to look like a proper political protest, and he's using his platform to say, essentially, shut up! Because the main crux of this controversy is just down to the way the thing is measured. Not necessarily the technology, but the wording that is said in the rulebook, that the 16:1 ratio is taken at ambient temperature, which means when the car is not running, not at full bore, and at potential temperatures where thermal expansion can occur and things can change, metals can manipulate, various other materials take on different properties and characteristics. And what Red Bull and Mercedes have been doing is that they've been acting like a really good Taskmaster contestant and just say, well, you didn't say when it was going to be measured, these particular ratios, did you? We thought around you, mate. And in theory, this does lead to a potential cost runaway where you can have things that behave at certain temperatures and behave at other temperatures in a more radical way than we've already got. And yes, that can lead to an absolute arms race where the smaller teams might be left for dust. But then again, Mercedes are supplying 4 teams and Red Bull are supplying 2, so the majority of the grid do stand to benefit, albeit a very slight majority. And the feistiness of Toto is simply down to the fact that he's had enough of the wandering years of Mercedes and wants to be back at the top again. He's done his time having humility being the watchword of his life, and now he wants to reign supreme again. And Formula One, the media side of things, is more than happy for Mercedes to dominate again and potentially see a George Russell Championship contention. But then again, that will be short-lived because, like we've seen before, there will be at a time, if Mercedes dominate, people saying, "Oh, Mercedes domination is so boring. Someone come along to save us from the tedium," which is exactly what was said about Red Bull against Mercedes, McLaren against Red Bull. It all comes in waves. And also, Toto is trying to stall for time in a way because if we get into the season proper, trying to change these regulations start to become a logistical nightmare because, well, you've got active racing at play here. There isn't much time left for Audi to get a real good effort to try and clarify things. I believe there are a couple more meetings coming up very soon, but that might be it until we actually go racing, and then it could get really messy. And it could easily damage reputations. And we already had a meeting back on the 22nd of January where Mercedes had been transparent and the current scrutineering approach did check things at ambient temperatures. That was confirmed. Therefore, everything was in accordance with the rules. But at the same time, the FIA and manufacturers did make progress on agreeing how to measure compression ratio when engines were hot too. But it's not something that can happen overnight with brand new bits and bobs and tools to measure. It will take time to find everything that is the right fit and that everyone's happy with. And with the Totosaurus Rex knocking around the longest serving team principal and therefore having the most clout of any team principal, it's going to take a little bit of time to try and get things swayed towards a more clarified situation. And this soap opera that we've seen so far could easily become a little bit of a chess match, and the customers might have some sway in all of that because, well, Mercedes supply 4 teams including themselves, Red Bull supply 2. That therefore gives them a 6-5 advantage in any negotiations. It's very small, but it's there. Because any mid-season clarification or rule change will require votes, and the blocks are not equal. So the rivals are doing what you would expect them to do. Raise the pressure and try and get the public on side. Use the old angle of, well, this isn't really in the spirit of the sport. Oh, well, Mercedes, what they're doing here is a little bit dodgy. And as we've seen in recent times, any innovation that looks a little bit different that we might not fully understand is immediately labelled as cheating. But this is something that has been going on for decades now, and it's just engineering cat and mouse. This is just part of the course. That doesn't necessarily mean the people that are protesting will not be the bigger people. No. They will milk that fact that people are really ripe to call people cheaters at the moment's notice. As well as them milking the general idea that the FIA has a negative aura around them, that they are seen to be doing nothing other than lining the pockets of their executives. And that could also be another reason why Toto's ranting so much, in that he's trying to just push all of these accusations away, whilst also saying, well, we've been doing our part, it's them that are causing all of the problems, and trying to shed some sunlight in private discussions. And private discussions do not like sunlight at all. So why is Audi the loudest one? Because yeah, Honda and Ferrari have aired their own concerns, but not nearly as angrily as the new manufacturer. The one that F1 wooed the most to come join the party a few years ago. Well, this pains me to say this, but right now, they're living a nightmare version of what they hoped for their first season, because they are a new works project with no customer teams, and have a car that's already confessing to having a very, very long list of issues attached to it, thanks to its Barcelona run. And when Mattia Binotto says this, and he was managing Ferrari at a very chaotic time, that is saying something. And it also strongly suggests that their target of 2030 for when they'll be really competitive is quite a realistic target, that they're not going to be hitting the ground running unless something absolutely miraculous happens up front and they get propelled up the order. Thusly, you get why Audi's being so pushy over this, because they want to try and understand where their destiny is going to go. Do they have to plow efforts into engine compression limits, or do they not have to worry about it? Because they've already signed off on this year's engine, they want to understand where they can go with the next year's engine and the engine after that. Because if you already found a situation where your rivals might be finding an advantage that you didn't, you might be on the back foot for at least a couple of years, unless the rules get changed quickly, and therefore you'll only have to suffer through it for maybe one season instead. You want to know where you stand, and you also can't rely on customers to provide you additional data to try and catch up. They are only one team, much like how Honda is also one team with Aston Martin. And even worse for them, how efficiently a car can turn fuel into forward movement is more important than ever, and how that couples to harvesting and deployment whilst the car's active aero is doing the hokey cokey, ideally not shaking it all about. Yeah, sorry for the unusual analogy, I do have a 2-year-old that's stuck in my head at this point, and now it's stuck in yours too. So for Audi, pushing for clarity is all about survival and buying time in case the rules do change later. If it gets cleared up as soon as possible, they'll have a grey area filled out for next year's development. Either the compression trick is legal, and they can add it guilt-free, or they don't have to worry about it. Add in the irony, deliberate or otherwise, that Toto is accusing others of distraction, whilst also being the loudest voice in the room. That might sound contradictory until you consider who he's really talking to. Because yeah, he said his piece about the teams, but he's mainly talking to the FIA out loud, as well as the general rumour mill that has been bubbling along since the end of the 2025 season. It was challenged but then found legal again, and they are not going to allow a last-minute mob led by Audi to try and dissuade them or derail their operations into a year where they are looking really, really good and they actually believe in themselves. And not to mention trying to deter a situation where we get to the first race of the season and it's mired in controversy and takes away from the fact that, hey, we're back at a circuit, we're back in a season, oh boy! But then it's spoiled by protests and stewards meetings and results that get delayed for days until they're confirmed, taking the fun out of the event, taking out the hype and just ugh. And that was kind of the situation around the Brawn 2009 Australian 1-2. That, yeah, we remember it as a fairy tale event, but back in the day, but they were still going through the controversy of the double diffuser. That kept rumbling on for many weeks before and after that race, but it did take initial momentum out. Honestly, Toto doesn't want that to happen again, especially with the engines being so reliable. The beginning of this new regulation cycle could actually be a technological triumph. This going on in the background, that wouldn't be great at all. And also, I will get the spanner out for this, it is my own personal belief that one day I would not be surprised if Toto Wolff made a bid to become the next FIA president if Mohammed Ben Sulayem does step down or is, well, he crashes out of the role like he crashed a Renault that one time. So as far as Toto's concerned and the FIA for now, all is absolutely well, and so should it remain. Everyone can enjoy 2026, and the drivers, they've also kind of sung from the same hymn sheet in their own way, as to say that their car is good and that everything is looking peachy with these new rules. Kimi Antonelli, for example, him saying that this year will be basically like speed chess, he puts it. That rookies might adapt quicker because they're used to new cars every single year. They jumped in last year and now they're going all new this year. And he specifically points to energy management and creativity in fights as the big step. And quite frankly, it plays out with the rookies being able to play willingly, fast and loose with their machinery. We see time and time again the youngsters pulling off damn dare moves that older drivers may decide to err on the side of caution with. It just reminds me again of what Max Verstappen did. I think around Felipe Nasser in 2015 around Spa. He practiced in a video game around Blanchimont to try and do an overtake on the outside, and he converted it in real life. That kind of boldness is not what the old-timers would actually bother to do, but Max did. And with Antonelli singing like this just makes me think he's the Italian Stappen even more. And this guy, he is a proper data lover. I recall an anecdote that he can remember lap times that he did years ago in a completely different car, and in the order in which he did them. He loves information like this. He loves statistics. And he's also constantly online. So all of this stuff we see from Kimi, it's so in tune with Mercedes. He is the perfect fit for that team. So when he's saying that this could end up Formula 1 becoming a tactical mini-game for him, this just sounds like he is absolutely loving these rules, that this new kind of car is absolutely his jam. And then we've got George Russell sounding really, really punchy after being best of the rest in 2025, very keen to have a title challenge against Max Verstappen. But at the same time, he's also openly praising how impressive the Red Bull power unit looked in testing. That's not the talk of a guy who thinks Mercedes has a freebie, but a guy who thinks that next year, well, this year actually, is going to be close and brutal and decided by execution. but he does have a very good shot at taking it all, though, he must admit. Well, I mean, George isn't going, oh, blimey, you really think so? I can win the championship? Oh, well, that's very nice of you to say, but... I mean, he's not guaranteeing it, per se, but he does have a very good shot at least doing better than P4 in the standings. And now we reach the part of the video which I wish to elaborate on something that I said at the top of the video, that the real situation into 2026 may have nothing to do with the engine compression limit, that being an absolute distraction tactic for the real winner about systems and their integration with the car. Because remember, it's 50-50 between the battery and the combustion unit. Because a few tenths from a combustion gain don't help you if your deployment strategy bleeds lap time everywhere else. Just look at what Mercedes are doing with their Microsoft deal and how it's explicitly framed around simulation and trackside decision-making. Pair that with Antonelli's comments about being 2 steps ahead in energy fights, and suddenly Mercedes' scariest advantage is that they're building an entire operation who's quite happy to march forward with this new Formula 1 spec, and quite keen to leave the old spec well and truly behind them. So in Mercedes' mind, arguing about the internal combustion engine is, a bit of a red herring. It is a legit situation, it's not like they're not taking it seriously, but in their mind it's become a little bit too loud and they wish to just nip it in the bud before it becomes a distraction and may seek to undermine their achievements and actually may not be the main story of 2026 after all. And there will be other teams who are realising what Mercedes have been realising and think, oh, well, energy deployment might actually be the ticket after all for ultimate performance, so we better focus on that. And the human side of the decision-making might be left for dust in comparison, or for those seeking just to have a really good internal combustion engine, or those seeking for just pure aero glory, which I do believe is Aston Martin's main ticket. Well, because they invested in Adrian Newey, that's his bag. And you do hear various teams talking about this chestnut, and one team that does make people a little bit jittery, especially if you're a McLaren fan, is, well, McLaren. They're openly admitting that they are struggling with the energy management side of things as of now. It's not a lost cause, though. They will get their head around it, but it's something that they will have to learn quickly, perhaps, whereas other teams might have a better grasp of it. And yes, there is always a Verstappen courting angle to be had here. There always is regarding Toto. I've said this for a while now. But despite Wolff and Verstappen downplaying chance instances where they've met up and accidentally with one another, the flirtations from the former have perhaps become more subtle. Leaning into what Max wants and appreciates. We all heard about the Nürburgring 24-hour saga, where schedules were changed with the heft of Mercedes changing it, so that means Max can actually perhaps take part in it. And the Mercedes contract with Verstappen's GT3 team. That is not a done deal, but it's a sign that Toto's willing to bend over backwards to allow Mercedes to facilitate Verstappen's dreams and career choices outside Formula 1. And what they're doing with their Formula 1 car is turning it into a bit of a billboard through technological excellence and accepting where Formula 1 is going. With a team boss that's got the rulebook in his hand and saying, yes, this rulebook is an absolutely glorious rulebook. The FIA's done a spectacular job. We have no problems with it. We are more than happy to run with it. You other teams, what you're doing? I mean, Max, honestly, them talking is like, you and Red. And of course, making Mercedes out to be a serious place to win, which is what Max really cares about. But then at the same time, we are seeing from Red Bull that it might not be as simple as just ticking every single box on Max Verstappen's Christmas list. Because Max has said quite publicly recently that he feels positive about the Red Bull Ford engine project after spending years thinking little of the new rules. He now actually quite likes them. And there's Russell over here saying that the Red Bull power unit looks impressive too. So given that and how much the Dutchman has seemed to enjoy the new partnership with Ford and Ford's desire to heed Max's advice with pretty much everything, Toto's tactics of posturing might not be enough. And on the subject of George, to be fair, him saying, blimey, that Red Bull power unit looks really good, it's more of a code of saying, oh, well, Max, if it's good over there, then there's no point coming over here. I'm quite happy with my own, thank you very much, and you're happy with yours. Let's keep it that way. But that doesn't mean Toto won't keep trying. That's the reason why George and Kimi only have a contract for this year. He wants to show Max that Mercedes can run a team calmly and without chaos, and what's going on with this engine stuff really doesn't help. This is a bit of an acid test. Which then brings us back to why Toto's being so aggressive. In a way, you can sort of think about 3 different places where he's coming from. First, he's trying to frame Mercedes as being the open and honest ones, and it's their rivals that are the problem, not them. And once that framing sticks, any late rule tweak starts to look like the FIA was being bullied into coercion, rather than the FIA clarifying it on their terms. Secondly, he's trying to put rivals into a lose-lose situation, straight up, and Ferrari they look pretty potent and might be Mercedes' biggest rivals thus far. Seriously, it might get to a situation where people that aren't Mercedes or Red Bull powered cannot win, because if you drag on these protests into the season, then you are made out to look like you're absolutely petty. And for Audi especially, as a brand new team with a reputation to try and build up from Sauber, do they really want to start it off on that note where they may be seen as petty? I don't think so. That's not what Audi came here for. But then if you don't protest and you then suddenly go quiet, you then render the whole point moot, and then actually it was perfectly fine. So it's now down to you for not coming up with it. So you shut your mouth. And also, if it turns out that energy deployment is the biggest way of trying to gain performance, then you'll just look absolutely silly. Either way, Mercedes is trying to say, well, we've been focusing on ourselves, we've not worried about other people, and them worrying about us, well, they can if they want, but it's not going to affect us. And then there's the third point, that he's trying to protect this incoming regulation cycle as an absolute clean reset on what's gone before, instead of thinking things retroactively, or worse, reactively. But Australia might be quite important, and as Russell claims, with Mercedes and Red Bull on equal footing and them not having a main advantage, if their cars look completely normal and once again they pass various legality checks, then the oxygen in that story will be lost forever and it will become increasingly irrelevant and not the main point. But if one of them suddenly looks really quick, then the story will regain some teeth again and it will be reinvestigated, and then it will become an enduring drama. But for now, Toto is banking on the former, that it's all about trying to understand that the power unit of the Formula 1 car these days is a split between old tech and new tech, and they're banking on the new tech being the crucial differentiator here. So yeah, he's going to, fine, let them complain about the old technology which is going the death of my own fellow kin dinosaurs. Oh yes, we're looking at the new technology, we believe in it, we're absolute data geeks, and we're just reveling in that moment. And that's before the fuel cost situation turns things even more savage, and we'll explain why partly the cost cap simply had to go up. Because you got to look back to when teams began to realise what advanced sustainable fuel development would actually cost, and there were initial reports and even Wolff quotes about it being far more expensive than expected, with projections jumping between a high end of roughly $170 per litre to $300, meaning several $100s per gallon, with nightmare scenarios maybe even four figures. No wonder the FIA allowed teams supposedly to not run those fuels in the shakedown test. The costs are simply massive. And in that kind of economy, any efficiency trick that gives you more work per drop becomes vital. So therefore, the compression ratio becomes a rational argument. It's not a way to try and find extra performance, it's trying to keep your costs down. So that could easily be one way that Toto can argue the situation, that they're thinking about the planet, they're thinking about fuel economy. Ah yes, we're thinking about net zero, going green. Formula 1, you have a target for 2030, right? And we're trying to costs down in fuel. You know, we're the good guys here. We're trying to come up with things. Red Bull, our old rivals, they're coming up with the same thing too. Audi, what the hell are you playing at? Yeah, that's the way Toto will probably spin it if it really does go further than it actually has done. So yeah, okay, was Toto being dramatic here? Absolutely, he had every right to be, because this was his opening statement, his main one on camera. Was he posturing? Sometimes. But the underlying fight that he is spoiling for is pretty genuine, about who's going to start off the year with the keys to the kingdom, and who may be the pretenders trying to take said keys away from them, and praying that they themselves, Mercedes, have already got them. And as that's going along, their own drivers are here telling us all where the real war will be fought anyway. And they are qualified to comment since they've actually driven the thing in real life over hundreds of laps already, before we've even gone to Bahrain. Russell ready for the challenge, and Kimi describing excitedly that he really looks forward to this brand new style of combat. All the while, Mercedes betting the farm that computers may win the day, and loving data as it's always done. I think after a little bit of soul-searching, Mercedes have finally discovered what the definition of their team is in the post-Hamilton era. They are going to be ruthless. They are going to be all about the data, where being clever counts as additional horsepower. Or, with this being Toto, Dino power. And what I'm building on for you is to move on from the end of this video here to the start of this video over here. I really believe you will like this video if YouTube actually shows it to you. But anyway, I'll see you over there or down there somewhere.